Hello. Oh my God, my friends over here have made some cards with my name on them. That's so good. Hi. So, my obsession with typography grew from my love of language, and it started when I first discovered this badass activist designer. But before I get into that, today I'm going to talk about words that move me, how I move words with animation, and hopefully by the end I will have tricked you into learning something cool. So I can pinpoint the moment this typography obsession began. It was second year of uni, first semester. We got given a list of designers to research, and completely at random I landed on this guy called Jonathan Barnbrook. I didn't know him from a bar of soap, and at that time I probably thought typography was something to do with like maps. But I learned that he was this rebellious, subversive designer who used lettering as a form of protest. He gave a shit about big issues. He signed the First Things First manifesto, which was a pledge to only work for companies doing good and to not work for corporations doing bad. And once I started researching him, I had this like revolutionary, revelatory epiphany where the clouds parted and a ray of sunshine shone down on me, and there were birds and butterflies and everyone's chi was aligned and all was right with the world. Probably in reality, it was the night before the assignment was due and I was frantically trying to finish it on time, but I was genuinely thrilled to discover that you could use words as a politically charged art form. So I'm really interested in moving words, and by that I mean words that move you when you read them, words that make you laugh or think or be angry or that teach you something. By way of introduction, I am an earnest, evolving, introverted, silly but passionate dork with too many part-time jobs. And just using that last note as a jumping off point, I just want to say that you don't need to quit your day job. I don't know if anyone in the room needs to hear this right now, but full-time freelance isn't the only end goal. It's not the pinnacle of success. Having a day job doesn't make you any lesser, and it's taken me years to figure that out. I was a little bit faster at figuring out that I really enjoy working with people who are doing good. I know that sounds like a broad and fairly subjective lens, but it's how I try and view everything, because if I'm approaching something with the mindset of this thing can help people, then I find I'm so much more motivated about the work itself. I personally have about 5 different part-time jobs. 2 days a week, I work for the University of Newcastle, doing print and digital illustration and layout and that sort of thing. Sometimes it's a little bread and buttery, but other times I get to do really cool things like creatively direct entire exhibitions, design and curate student spaces, and create inclusive merchandise. Coming from a typographic background, I try and shoehorn as much lettering work into my days there as I possibly can, but working in the education sector feels really good to me. 1 day a week, I work for a startup hub in the city and I visually brand all of their events. So people there are working on things like renewable energy, teaching coding to kids, autonomous robots. It's really satisfying to be able to use my skills to support what they're doing, and it feels good to be immersed in the local startup ecosystem. Some days I work as an art director for a small agency, and lately that's been on projects to do with things like smart cities and sustainable water consumption. And it feels especially good to lead the charge, visually at least, on big issues like those. I also do freelance work amongst all of that. So I try to mostly focus on typographic work because I'm all about those moving words. Graphic design's kind of like my bread and butter, but lettering's my jam. Doubly so, thank you. Thank you for kindly laughing at that. Doubly so if it's for a good cause, like a podcast about kindness, a market that supports the local art scene, or personalised signage for a special family home. And then on some Saturdays, I work at the ABC as a radio producer, which is sort of nothing at all to do with the rest of my design life, but it appeals to my sense of community, and on an ideological level, I really value being part of the national public broadcaster. So that's 4 part-time jobs with ongoing freelance thrown into the mix. I used to find it really embarrassing to relay my very patchworky work situation to people. I felt like if I wasn't doing one thing 100% of the time, then I was failing somehow. But I'm interested in lots of different things, and I really love my lifestyle now. There's a bit of routine and structure, and from that, there's financial stability. But then there's also space for ridiculous big side projects and freelance jobs and brunch dates and beach coffees with friends. I don't have a full-time lettering job, but I do get to do heaps of lettering work in my various part-time roles. I don't have a portfolio full of big-name corporate clients, but I do have one that's continuing to grow with work that I'm really proud of, and that says something. So when we talk about typography, we're mostly talking about the shape of the letter forms, the way they're drawn, how they interact with the space around them. We don't often talk about the words themselves or what we're writing, but if we're going to spend the time carefully crafting the visuals, it might as well say something worth hearing. So this is an installation I made with my dad. For about a year, every day when Dad would go for a walk down the beach, he would collect a handful of plastic bottle tops that had washed up on the beach. That is the kind of profusely decent role model that he is. My daddy is here today. You can buy him a Southern Comfort and orange juice later if you want. Anyway, he ended up with literal buckets full of rubbish, thousands of bits of plastic that had washed up on the shore. It was coming up on Clean Up Australia Day, so Dad and I decided to take the bottle tops back down to the beach and to build a moving message out of them. The photos we took ended up on the front page of the local paper and have since found their way into all sorts of environmental blogs and social media platforms. There's a lot of typography that looks beautiful but kind of doesn't say anything, like live, laugh, love. You know those videos that show you all the tricks marketing people use to make food look good in ads? Like instead of ice cream, they'll use mashed potato and food dye so that it holds its shape better. Or in cereal ads, they'll use PVA glue instead of milk. To me, that's kind of what that empty, inspirational lettering is. It's like a really pretty looking meal that just tastes a little bit like cardboard. And I really just think we can all aim a little bit higher. Art should be delicious for both our eyes and our brains. As visual communicators, we have a really unique skill set. We know how to sell a message in a powerful, emotive way. We know how to make things look beautiful so people engage with them. We're good with words. If we all just focus our energy a bit more on shit that we actually care about instead of trying to rehash vague, empty phrases to try and please the Instagram algorithm, I think we might all be a little bit happier. So I wanted to show you a couple of pieces I made that were direct responses to political events. So Change the Date I made because I think it's pretty dumb to have a national public holiday on the anniversary when a bunch of imperialistic dudes started a centuries-long campaign to massacre the oldest living culture in the world. Not the most inclusive move ever. I drew white supremacy is terrorism after a peaceful protester was killed in Charlottesville by an alt-right white dude. And then Trump tried to defend the guy's supporters, saying they were fine people. And this colourful little vote animation I made in an attempt to encourage Australians to show up for the same-sex marriage plebiscite a little while back. So much as I would love to say that I single-handedly solved systemic racism and homophobia with these few drawings, I think there's still a little bit of work to do on both those fronts. We're not going to save the world with lettering, but we can at least amplify these meaningful messages to cut through the cluttered landscape. I find making this sort of work doubly useful because if I really care about the issue, it's way easier for me to talk about the project. I'm a textbook introvert, so networking and hustling and self-promotion is really hard for me. But if I've worked on something I'm passionate about, it's way easier and more comfortable for me to spruik. It's in service of something that's bigger than me. This is an animation I made a little while ago to try and distill some of the self-doubt and imposter syndrome that a lot of artists, particularly women, often feel. Like probably a lot of you, as a perfectionist, I've spent way too much time thinking I'm not good enough. If we are feminine, we are expected to just be humble all of the time. As creatives, we're often wildly insecure, and as Australians, we really hate a tall poppy and we're always talking ourselves down. What a waste of time and energy all of that self-editing is. So, off the back of that little soapbox preach, I just want to pause here for a second to ask what you care about. This is a screensaver I made one day when I was feeling particularly full of existential dread, and I'm really not trying to make you feel like that, but I'm just using this as an excuse to stop and reflect. If you can indulge me in a little bit of audience participation, I want you to write down 2 or 3 things that get you really fired up. It could be something big and serious like climate change, or how like all of the bugs are dying and the world as we know it is probably going to collapse in 2050. Or it could be something dumb and frivolous like pizza toppings or Taylor Swift's latest feud. What's a thing that you could talk about endlessly with someone? Maybe it's RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars Season 2. I totally wouldn't be mad if it were RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars Season 2. Mel gets it. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to write something down, and I've got a little bit of thinking music to help. All right, so now that you've mulled that one over, I want to look at moving words in the context of side projects. So, lots of people talk about the value of side projects and how they're an awesome way to generate the type of portfolio content that you really want to be known for. I am totally on board with that. What I don't think we talk enough about is how good they are for learning new skills. I'm self-taught in a lot of different areas, and I credit that almost entirely to the side projects that I've worked on. I make mountains of side projects all the time, and my main motivation is really just to learn new skills. That's it, really. Anything more than that is a bonus. So when I was fresh out of uni with my newfound obsession with typography and moving words, one of the first things I was busting to learn was how to create typefaces. So I discovered that one of the biggest and best type designers in the country lived around the corner from me, and Wayne Thompson from the Australian Type Foundry, who hasn't got nearly enough shout outs in everyone's talks today, agreed to take me on as an intern. So I learnt stacks hanging out in Wayne's studio. Sometimes I'd help with bits of his commercial font jobs, but often Wayne would help me with my work. And one such bit of work was a layered typeface that I was trying to create. It was really my first big side project, and I started it when I was studying typography in Rome. Really quick sidebar, I took a course with the New York School of Visual Arts, mostly because Steve Heller and Louise Philly were teaching it, and I desperately wanted to meet them. But I started working on this Roman-flavoured font while I was there, and then basically spent the next year with Wayne building it, learning how to use font software, that sort of thing. It took a full 12 months to finish, but once it got out there, it was featured on Behance a couple times, and it's now licensed through the Designers Foundry. That was a huge project that taught me stacks about type design. Plus, I get a little trickle of passive income each month from the sales. And I also gained a mentor out of that project. These days, Wayne and I usually spend most of our time together being either very sarcastic or very silly. But just to get a little sentimental for a second, I can't stress enough how pivotal he has been in my career. He vouches for me all the time when I'm unsure what to charge, or if a client's dicking me around, or if I can't quite get the curve of a letter properly. He is the first person that I turn to for advice. Sometimes that advice isn't particularly nuanced, but he has become one of my favorite friends to have a whinge binge to. Wayne is like the caring, supportive dad that I actually already have, but there's always room for more bad dad jokes. Another early side project this side of graduating was an exercise in illustration. I wasn't very good at it, so I made up a project that would involve lots and lots of drawing. I was really into bad puns. I still am. Thank you, Nikita. And like every other designer in the world, I really loved ampersands. So with those 3 bits of motivation, I made a collection of illustrated, pun-infused ampersands. So Nyan% was at the height of Nyan Cat fame. Yes, We Can % was an ode to Obama and Shepard Fairey. There's also odes in there to Greek islands, to Jackie Chan, Steve Carell, Spam. I still have an extensive list in my phone of ampersands that I never quite got around to drawing. Wu-Tang Clan % was one. Silence of the Lamb % was another one. Steak Diane %. They're so stupid, but they were surprisingly popular. For a brief time in 2014, they were all over Reddit and Pinterest. Steve Heller wrote about them in Wired magazine. By then, he knew me from Rome, so that course paid for itself. But I learned how to be a better illustrator doing that. Later on, I decided I really needed to practice my brush lettering skills, so I made up a side project for that. Again, still really interested in language and humour, I decided to centre the project around mixed metaphors. So at a glance, they kind of look like your typical motivational quotes, but on closer inspection, they are completely nonsensical phrases that have just sort of been Frankensteined together. I got lots of positive, very silly feedback and still sometimes get people suggesting phrases to me that I should letter. But I improved my brush lettering skills doing that. A while after that, I wanted to learn more about dimensional typography and stop motion. So I'm a pretty private person generally, and I realized that not many people outside of my circle of friends and family knew too much about me. So with the aim of sharing a little bit more about myself and also learning how to do stop motion, I set off on a side project that I called Logo Portraits, where I recreated my logo out of different objects that were significant to me. So there's one made out of 4-leaf clovers that I found. My not very impressive party trick is that I'm really good at finding 4-leaf clovers. There's one made out of underwear because I really bloody hate doing laundry, so I have just like too many pairs of undies so I don't have to do laundry as much. There's one made from tea leaves. I don't drink coffee, but tea is like a totally comforting ritual to me that punctuates my days. And then there's things like rainbow pom-poms and glitter, which I just find joyful. But I got a heap of stop motion practice in doing this project. All of this is to say that self-directed learning is so valuable and side projects are a beautiful vehicle for that. Side projects also have 1,000 other benefits like building creative confidence, helping you find your style, a humorous substitute for your own lips. That's just a cheeky little Simpsons reference there for those who know. But they make you better. Ira Glass from This American Life has a really famous speech called The Gap, and it's about getting better at your craft. The general gist is that it takes a ton of output doing your craft over and over and over again until your execution matches your taste level. So there's this gap between what you know looks good and what you're actually able to produce. And the only way to close it is just to make lots of work. Side projects are great for that. You can see through this timeline of my side projects how my work slowly gets better over time. They're also really good for finding paid work, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we are back at the existential dread screensaver. I want to pause again and get you to grab those notebooks out once more if you can. So I've just told you a bunch of things that I learnt through making side projects: type design, illustration, brush lettering, stop motion. What are some skills that you would like to learn? Maybe you've been busting to learn claymation or paper art or 3D modeling. What have you been putting off learning because it looked too difficult or too daunting? Jot a few of them down. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds of this very beautiful thinking music. What's been holding you back from learning the skills that you wrote down? I think sometimes we put off trying these things because we think it's going to be too expensive or too difficult. We tell ourselves that even though we'd love to get better at photography, we can't afford a decent tripod, so we put it off and we never get around to it. I'll preface this by saying that I know I'm speaking from a position of all sorts of good fortune, but you really don't need a lot of money or gear to get started. You definitely can make do. You don't need the fanciest equipment in the world. Chances are, if you're sitting in this room, you've got a laptop, you've got the Creative Cloud, you really don't need much more than that. A bit of Photoshop know-how can mask even the dodgiest of studio setups. I don't have any fancy lighting equipment. I don't have a proper studio. I didn't even have a decent tripod until fairly recently. A lot can be salvaged in post-production. For example, I didn't have proper rigging when I made this stop motion, so I had to just splay my tripod across 3 separate stools, all of which were completely different heights, and then just trying to even it out in post-production. Such a pro. I really wanted a yellow backdrop for this photo, so hot tip, I masking taped a couple of bath towels to my wardrobe door. It made cutting it out in Photoshop easier later, but yeah, very professional. I don't think I even owned a tripod when I did the Clean Up Your Act piece. So I had to make do by standing on top of upturned plastic pots and then just kind of physically reaching out over it as much as I could. Just under 2 years ago, I started getting into animation. I had this conspiracy Keanu moment where I'm like, I'm already into moving words, but what if they were actually moving? It's something I'd been wanting to learn since forever, but it just seemed like this beast of a thing, and I didn't know where to start, and it all seemed too hard. One of my mates is a ridiculously talented animator, and he sat down with me and showed me a couple of After Effects tricks to get started. So this is the first animation that I ever made. It says fleeting, and also it is fleeting. So it was done using a tool called Trim Paths in After Effects, which is a really simple technique. It's quick to learn, but it can make your work look really elegant. And it's incredibly motivating to see your work come to life like this. Once I started moving words around, I was so keen to keep learning and animating. I made a RuPaul animation, and I made an animation about the artist Christo, and I made my friend an animation for a business. I made heaps of stuff in After Effects, and then I discovered you could do frame-by-frame animation in Photoshop, so I got really into that. These types of animation were conceptually really quite similar to the stop-motion stuff I had been teaching myself, where you take a photo, change a bit, take another photo, change a bit. Photoshop animation's kind of just like a digital flipbook. But I found that through adding these extra layers of movement, I could make my work 1,000,000 times more engaging. You might glance at a static word for a second or two and then just kind of keep scrolling. But if it's dancing around or morphing or vibrating in some way, it makes you stop and look. You watch it over and over again to take in all those lively little nuances, and it becomes this whole other layer of storytelling. So by this point, I felt like I was starting to get better at all of the different skills I'd been teaching myself: illustration, stop motion, hand lettering, type design. The time felt ripe for another side project, so I set myself the challenge of highlighting all of those skills in a really succinct way. I wanted to be able to quickly explain to people all the ways that I approach typography and language, So I made this little show reel. I say little, but thank you. I say little, but those 40 seconds probably took about 3 months worth of spare time to pull together. That scene where I write the word animation with my fingers, no joke, that took 42 takes to get right. My partner Nick is a saint for helping me film that. But I'll show you, look, 42 takes.
That's the way we became the Brady Bunch.
Animation's fun, but it is time consuming. I want to quickly show you just one more side project because it's my most recent one and it was a metric fuck ton of work and I'm really proud of it. Everyone here's heard of the 36 Days of Type challenge, yeah? You pick whatever theme you like, but you just have to post a letter a day. So ever the sucker for punishment, I decided to make my entire project animated because I wanted to get better at animation. I also wanted to center it around some female identifying artists and creators that I find inspiring. So that's what I did. I won't go through piece by piece because there's too many, but if you do want a breakdown, you can jump on my Instagram account and have a look. But I have highlighted a couple of them for you here. So I deliberately played with a whole range of animation styles, After Effects, Photoshop, stop motion. I tried to put my spin on each piece and to reference each artist's work in a way that wasn't just kind of straight plagiarizing. I feel like we could probably have an entirely separate conversation about finding and refining your style. It's hard. I'm still not there, but I do have a bit of a gripe with like heavy-handed style stealing. Style is a really elusive thing and some people spend their whole lives trying to find theirs, so it's kind of a bit of a dog act to just pinch someone else's. That being said, we are all a bunch of impressionable sponges and we reflect back what we take in. My general approach is just to try and cast as wide a net as possible when looking for inspiration. If you're sampling tiny bits of lots of things rather than huge bits of one thing, you slowly carve out something that's unique to you. But taking part in a side project challenge like that was a really steep learning curve. These animations probably averaged out at about 5 or 6 hours per piece, so well over 150 hours in total. But then some were really fast to do. The letter I was one of those surprisingly quick ones. Like Kate, I am a very big fan of Rachel Burke or iMakestagram. So the letter I was based off her and it probably looks a bit more complicated than it actually is. This is essentially just 5 scribbly drawings butted up against each other and then set to loop. So you set it up in the Photoshop timeline window, export for web, abracadabra, now you're an animator. So we are back here at the existential dread screensaver for one last time, I promise. So if you could grab your notebooks out once more, that would be amazing. So this side project that I just showed you was all about people whose styles inspire me. I want you to write down the names of some creatives that you love. If you can, steer clear of just naming other letterers because it is a very small field and if you're only referencing from within, it's going to get pretty incestuous pretty quickly. I know we all just want to be like Jessica Hish, Lauren Hom, Gemma O'Brien hybrids, but they all already exist and are very much still working. So if you can cast your net a little bit wider, please do. Maybe there's a filmmaker you love or a fashion designer. Could be a musician or a chef or a long dead philosopher. Who's someone whose work you could just consume forever? Write their names down. You've got 15 more seconds. Gotcha. So most of the work I've showed you so far has been either side projects or self-directed work. And I feel like you might be wondering, oh yeah, that's cool, but how do you actually make money? One good way to make money is to have a job. What a precious nugget of wisdom that is. If you like money, try jobs. Your conference tickets just paid for themselves. It can be a design job or a day job. Full-time freelance isn't the only end goal. I mentioned before that I have a few jobs that keep me ticking along, but what I didn't mention was how influential my side projects have been in shaping those jobs. When people see you spending time on side projects, doing that self-directed work and investing in yourself, it makes them want to invest in you too. When the university saw my ampersand project, they were like, oh, sweet, you do illustrations. Please do some illustrations for us. The Mixed Metaphors project led to a ton of freelance brush lettering projects. There's album covers, event branding, a live lettering gig for Mimco. The logo portraits that I did led to several commercial stop motions as well, some typographic, some not. The dream for me is to do typographic work for people who are doing good. Every now and then, all those creative planets align, and quite recently I completed a large-scale mural for a company called Rakeswan, who are a seed production company, and their main mission is just to get the world to eat more vegetables. So it's a really simple, noble cause, and I can totally get behind it. I'd worked on some smaller projects with them before, so there was already a bit of trust established, and they pretty much just gave me full creative license. So over the course of one day, I painted this 6 meter by 2.5 meter mural in front of an audience. It was typographic on multiple levels, both the negative space and the words hidden within. It was illustrative, it was performative, there was like a hint of animation. They were moving words for a good cause. It ticked all of the boxes for me. I know our industry breeds a lot of complicated feelings about money. Some of us feel that because we get to do what we love, we should charge less for it. It's kind of a damaging mindset though, not just to you as an individual, but to the industry more broadly. Our art has value and we shouldn't discount that just because we happen to enjoy making it. There are enough people on the outside devaluing our industry with shitty sites like Fiverr. If you cannot contribute to that from within, that's even better. I've always had a pretty decent relationship with money. From a young age, I wanted to make art and make money. When I was in primary school, my best friend and I used to make greeting cards and sell them to our parents' friends. It was such a good racket for a couple of 9-year-olds, and we earned way more doing that than we would have just chores for pocket money. In high school, I got really into jewelry making. So with the money I had made from the greeting cards, I bought boxes of glass beads and would stay up late on weekends making necklaces and stuff. That was even more lucrative, and I'd always have a list of commissions from friends and relatives. Both my parents are super creative and always making things, but my mum especially was the one who championed having fun while getting paid. And just to further illustrate that fact, my mum is here today flogging my merch at my stall outside. If you haven't already said hi, Wendy will most likely be back out there at the next break, and she's got way better advice than I do, so you can go have a chat to her. You can buy her a Tia Maria and milk later if you want. On the topic of merch and passive income, products are another really great way to earn a bit of cash. It takes some outlay, of course, but once you're over that hurdle, it's a really beautiful way for people to connect with and support your work. Your friends might not be able to pay you several $1,000s to paint them a mural, but they probably can afford the $30 for a t-shirt. So buy your friends' art. Buy my art if you want. I have made a few products, all of which are available for very reasonable prices at my stall outside, which I have dubbed the Sophie Elinor Passive Income Emporium. I originally designed this STEMinist pin for the university to gift to new female students, but when I shared it online, it got such a huge response that I ended up making a new one to sell externally, and it's officially become a bestseller on Etsy, which is pretty cool. I wanted to make another pin just for you guys today. So the Word Nerd pin is a Typism exclusive. If you like the look of it and identify as one, you can come and see Mum and I in the break. Sites like Cotton Bureau are really great for apparel design. So you just supply the art and then they look after all of the production. So if, like me, you're a chronic overthinker, you might rock this t-shirt. And this glorious little holographic print is another Typism exclusive. It's a quote from comedian Harris Whittles, and he said it in the context of how extreme we all tend to be online, how we're either like blindly obsessed with something or outraged by it. It's this swing between like stan and cancel culture. Probably all just chill out a bit and, you know, be a little more understanding. None of us are perfect, but we're all mostly trying our best. I'm not going to ask you to take any more notes. You've had enough audience participation for one day. But I would like you to read back over what you've written. Hopefully by now you've got a list of issues that you care about, skills that you want to learn, and people who inspire you. So this is the brief that I'm giving to you today. Get fired up about whatever issue you wrote down. Express that passion through a new skill that you need to practice. And if you're struggling with a visual style, don't just pinch Gemma O'Brien's. Look to the work of the filmmaker or the chef or whoever you wrote down and try to think of a way to express what you love about their work through your medium of lettering. So here's one that I prepared earlier. I really care about championing the work of female identifying creatives. I really wanted to learn how to do cinemagraphs, and I'm inspired by the work of Jenna Josepha, who creates this fleshy, titillating, kind of twisted music videos. So for my 36 days of type, I made this letter D. This is my butt. If you thought I was going to end on a serious soapboxy note, you were wrong. I'm ending with gratuitous nudity. A lot of my friends thought this was like an elbow or a knee or something. It's not. It's my skinny white butt. It's actually really hard to film. I had to like lather up with coconut oil to get that shine going and then basically fold myself in half and like white girl twerk. It's a really good core workout. But I did it because in the immortal words of Ice Cube and Ms. Toy, you can do it, put your back into it. I can do it, put your ass into it. It's a classic millennial trope, but I think most of us really want to have creative careers where we contribute something positive and meaningful. We want to do work that feels good and have an impact and get paid. I'm very much a work in progress, but I feel like I'm slowly starting to carve out a way to do that with typography and moving words, and I hope that you do too. Thanks.